For most of history, taxes were not normal. They were interruptions. A war, a famine, a ransom. In early civilizations, taxation was reactive. It appeared when something broke. In ancient Mesopotamia, rulers raised levies, only during emergencies recorded on clay tablets. Once the crisis passed, the demand ended. In classical Athens, extraordinary contributions were collected only during wartime. They were debated. They were justified. Even in the Roman Republic, direct taxation of citizens inside Italy was rare. The state survived on conquest, on spoils, on tribute. Taxes were temporary because power was constrained. A ruler who demanded too much, too often, did not survive. Memory was the limit. People remembered what was promised. Rome did not invent taxation. It postponed it. By the 1st century BCE, Rome maintained standing armies, professional soldiers, paid regularly. This was new. In 167 BCE, after the defeat of Macedonia, Rome abolished direct taxes on Roman citizens. The empire appeared tax-free at its core. But this was not efficiency. It was delay. Rome financed itself through expansion. Conquest paid for conquest. As long as borders moved outward, the system worked. But expansion slowed. By the 2nd century CE, military costs stayed high, while new territory stopped arriving. Temporary levies returned, then returned again. Rome did not collapse from taxation. It collapsed because a system built on expansion had no replacement. Taxes became permanent only after conquest failed. After Rome, European rulers lacked reach. Kings did not tax automatically. They asked. In medieval England, new taxes required approval from councils of nobles and towns. In France, extraordinary taxes were granted for specific wars and specific durations. A tax had 3 elements: a reason due, a scope, an end date. Once the reason expired, the tax was supposed to expire with it. This was not democracy. It was limitation. Taxation was visible, negotiated, political, and because it was visible, it remained temporary. The system failed under pressure. From the 14th century onward, war changed. Gunpowder replaced levies. Fortifications replaced battles. Mercenaries replaced seasonal armies. Wars stopped ending quickly. The 100 Years' War, 1000, 337 453, lasted generations. Temporary taxes were renewed, then renewed again. What was justified once became justified repeatedly. Rulers learned a quiet lesson. Ending a tax was more dangerous than keeping it. So taxes stayed, not because the war never ended, but because the state no longer trusted peace. Recurring taxes required structure, collectors, courts, records. By the 16th century, European states built permanent tax bureaucracies. This changed the nature of power. Taxes no longer funded events. They funded institutions, and institutions do not dissolve themselves. Even when wars paused, the system remained. The question stopped being, should we tax? It became, how much can we collect? Britain formalized permanence. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded to support long-term state borrowing. Debt became permanent, so revenue had to follow. In 1799, income tax was introduced to fund war against Napoleon. It was explicitly temporary. It ended, then returned. By the mid-19th century, income tax was embedded. Taxes no longer followed war. War followed taxes. Revenue stabilized borrowing. Borrowing stabilized war. Time itself became collateral. Income tax changed everything. For the first time, the state followed the individual. Not land, not trade, labor. Earnings were measured before they were touched. The state no longer waited at the market. It entered the household. This was not only financial, it was psychological. Payment became personal. The 20th century removed the exit. World War I expanded taxation permanently. So did the Great Depression. So did World War II. Each crisis justified higher taxes. Each recovery kept them. Temporary measures were never fully reversed. Not because governments forgot, but because reversal introduced uncertainty. Taxes became shock absorbers. Permanent pressure felt safer. Then sudden release. The final step was automation. Withholding removed choice. Payment happened. Before income arrived, no decision. No moment of resistance. Taxes stopped being felt. They became background noise. Invisibility replaced enforcement. Originally, taxes had a narrative. This is why. This is when it ends. Today, they have none. They exist without explanation, without expiration. The system does not persuade. It executes. What has no story cannot be debated. When taxes never end, behavior adapts. Planning replaces resistance. Compliance replaces debate. Citizens adjust expectations downward. States adjust extraction upward. No confrontation, only normalization. Permanent taxes created stability. Debt became manageable. Budgets became predictable. But stability hides accumulation. Pressure does not disappear. It spreads. And systems that spread pressure rarely release it. Modern states do not justify taxation. They assume it. What began as emergency became environment, and environments shape behavior without permission. Consent once mattered, because taxes were temporary. When taxes became permanent, consent became procedural. The system no longer needs agreement, only continuity. Taxes did not become permanent by force. They became permanent because they worked. They stabilized power. They reduced uncertainty. But permanence changes meaning. A system that never releases pressure does not feel oppressive until it does. And by then, there is no mechanism for removal.